We are not concerned over demand for electric vehicles. We think they'll be the future. Tesla is still the leader there.
This quarter is another good reminder of just how short-term the market is to what Tasha's saying. Next 2 quarters, what's pricing going to do? Meanwhile, you have a company that's ramping over 50% growth year over year, is in the best position cost, kind of cutting prices to drive demand if they need to and still remaining profitable. So I think this is kind of a classic.
こんにちは。テスラ全力チャンネルの太一です。現在、テスラ株は直近の1ヶ月間で最大 25% も上昇した後、そこから足元1週間では高値の299ドルから現在の255ドルまで、実に 15% も下落するなど短期的な要因に振り回されています。しかし、テスラの投資材料は年内のサイバートラックですとか、新型のモデル3の生産体制の構築、各国のギガファクトリー建設による生産ペースの向上、廉価版モデルの生産などの EV 販売に関する出来事の他にも、メガパックの大量生産、Fsd やロボタクシー、人型ロボットのオプティマスなど、エネルギービジネス、AI 関連のビジネスなどで指数関数的に成長するポテンシャルの大きなジャンルが多く存在します。特に FSD については、この動画を作っている最中にも、イーロン・マスクからバージョン12のメジャーアップデートが発表されています。このようにどれか一つの材料でも普通の銘柄では大きな買いになる規模感の材料がお互いに相乗効果を発揮しながらこれから実現されていくことを踏まえると明らかに今の売りは近視眼的な投資家による売りと考えることができるので長期投資家からしたら買いのタイミングであることがわかるわけです。こうした買いのタイミングはいつまでになるのかはわかりませんが今年の下半期にはサイバートラックの納車イベントや AI デーなども控えているので長くは続かないと思っています。
Tasha, why don't you start? Just give us a quick rundown of the quarter for Tesla and some of these FSD updates we got.
Yeah, so I think Tesla reported last week. I think a lot of the concern is sort of over. We'd call them shorter term things. So mainly, how our margin's going to be affected by price cuts. We heard that there would be factory updates that'll affect production, and as well as sort of this kind of looming concern of demand. But I'd say from the ARC side, thanks to Sam's work, we are not concerned over demand for electric vehicles. We think they'll be the future. Tesla is still the leader there.
珍しくターシャ・キーニー氏が弱気になっていますが、これは先ほど触れたイーロン・マスクによる FSD のメジャーアップデートのバージョン12の発表前のインタビューなので仕方ない部分はあります。逆に言えばバージョン12の正式リリースが順調にいっている今、ターシャ・キーニー氏の懸念は杞憂に終わった可能性があります。また世界では引き続き EV 化の強い流れが進んでいます。私たち日本人にはこうしたトレンドに触れる機会は少なくて、一部では反発する声もあるようなんですが、世界の EV 化の流れはほぼ待ったなしの状態で、各国は2030年に向けて着実に歩みを進めています。しかし気になるのは値引きの影響です。この動画の後半で値引きをする狙いとその影響について詳しく触れていきます。
On the autonomy side, what was really interesting was, so one, I think, like just zooming out over time, Sam, like FSD autonomy is such a focus. And if you look back 5 years ago, it was barely talked about at all. So I think, that's from our perspective, that's great because we think it'll be, over 60% of the enterprise value of the company over the next 5 years. So I'm happy to see it talked about so much. We did hear Elon say, he thinks it's going to be quasi-infinite demand for the robotaxi, right? We think that, we've estimated the total addressable market is more like $11 trillion, let's say, over the next decade for robotaxi or autonomous ride hail.
世界の EV シフトという流れは自動運転機能の実現と同時並行的に進んでいます。そしてこの自動運転技術を確立した企業こそが EV 覇権の王者になると思っています。なぜかというと EV そのものは差別化できないのでコモディティ化していくとともに一方で人工知能や膨大な計算処理とエネルギー管理を必要とする完全自動運転の実現は数値面で完全に勝敗がつくので各社が横並びで自動運転機能を提供するというのはあまり現実的ではなくてどこかの一社が全市場を抑えると考えるからです。もちろん現時点ではテスラこそがその一社に最も近い位置にあると考えています。この理由についても動画の後半で解説します。
And we heard that Tesla say that they think that their robotaxi vehicle could be, in terms of like produce cars per hour, the highest production of any car in history, which I think just kind of highlights their commitment to this.
Tasha, what do you say? I feel like one of the biggest pushbacks, full self-driving, it's just never going to happen. It's impossible.
Yeah. Well, I think, so we get asked this question a lot. So our midpoint is that Tesla will launch a robotaxi service in 2024. So that's next year.
私は2024年にロボタクシーを実現するというターシャ・キーニ氏の目標は少し早すぎる印象があると思います。確かにイーロン・マスクは2023年にメジャーアップデートによりバージョン12がリリースされる可能性があると話していましたが、それはかなり楽観的なスケジュールだったと考えています。実際、先ほどイーロン・マスクからバージョン12のアルファ版をすでに試しているとのツイートがありましたが、その性能面での評価ですとか、実運用におけるバグの調査など、現時点では FSD の実現可能性を判断できる時期にはまだないと思っています。
Like, why do we think that? Well, okay, Tesla has said, and Elon has said many times that he thinks this year they will solve for full self-driving, meaning, right now it's a beta software. You have to keep your hands on the wheel. What I imagine full self-driving to be is, you actually don't have to pay attention as the driver anymore. So I think that one, we've always been a little bit more conservative than Elon. So, we think, if they cross that threshold this year, what's the likelihood they'll actually launch a service, which kind of does take some, operational and logistics bandwidth to do. But I also think that, there's a lot of things that give us confidence. So there's that sort of, managing Tesla's timeline. There's looking at the videos that we see online, posted on Twitter by users. Some of them actually, you don't have the steering wheel nag feature on, so their hands are actually off. But they're completing what look like, start to finish, ride-hail rides with Uber on their phone, or at least, barely touching the wheel, maybe in the very beginning and the very end. So it seems like the FSD capability, at least in certain geographies, right? Maybe not everywhere, maybe California, where it works the best. It looks really close to possible. And then the third thing that I'd mention is just, all the updates that we've seen this year in AI broadly. We know that those in diffusion models and large language models, that, it's not exactly the same. That a lot of those advances should in some way port over to other industries like autonomy. And I think actually diffusion's a good example because we know that Tesla is moving towards that even more so.
And I think, Nick, before you ask a question here, I see you want to. I think the other thing that's important to point out is that there are already autonomous cars out there that are charging money for rides. Right. So just the basic assumption that it's impossible and will never happen needs to be thrown out of the window, because there's over 10 cities right now where you have autonomous cars. And so the question isn't, is this possible? We know it's possible. The question is, how quickly can this scale? And I think, the exciting thing about Tesla's approach is the potential for how quickly it can scale. But Nick, over to you.
事実として完全自動運転機能によるタクシー事業は Waymo やクルーズなどがすでに成功して配車サービスとして展開しています。しかし Waymo やクルーズなどの自動運転機能のアプローチは場所を限定した上でカメラなどから得られた画像解析を中心に運転操作を決定しているので、テスラのアプローチとはやや異なります。どういうことかというと、テスラは人工知能、もっと言うとニューラルネットワークを使って得られた学習データから物体や状況を抽象的に捉えて、そこから意味を解釈しながら時系列的な自己予測などを行っています。つまり人間の思考に近い形で状況の抽象化と意思決定の仕組みというものを自らの学習モデルとして取り込んでいるので、より高度なメタ認知を行うことができます。これによって AI は経験値を多く積まなければならないので、学習データが膨大に必要になるというデメリットがある一方で、より柔軟に対応したり、一つの失敗から多くの学習をすることができるなど、汎用性が高くなるという決定的なメリットがあります。
Just a question on the OEM announcement and Tesla potentially licensing FSD. We should be taking that as a good sign that FSD is getting, close to, full-scale release if they're in talks with other OEMs to license it, right?
And also, what's an OEM?
Yes, original equipment manufacturer. That's an automaker. And yeah, I I'm glad you brought that up, Nick, because one, it was a very important takeaway from the call. I think, I don't know, there's two ways to look at this. It's like the traditional automakers have not been very good at autonomy. So I don't know, do I actually trust their judgment as to what their next move is? Maybe not. But I, to your point, yes, it's like Tesla has to be showing them something that they think is interesting. But I also just think it's kind of like the supercharger network is the gateway drug in this situation, right? So we saw a lot of automakers sign up for that. They, it seems it's better for them. It's also obviously better for Tesla. It gives them kind of a nose under the hood into other electric vehicles. And I don't think that every traditional automaker will be successful in autonomy. And according to Sam and I's work, we think that industry will consolidate quite a bit. So I'm not surprised to see it.
NACS 規格、いわゆるテスラの充電規格に他の自動車メーカーが続々と参入しているのは、将来的にテスラの Fsd ライセンスを提供するためだと言っているのはアークインベスト社だけではありません。テスラが他社に Fsd のライセンスを販売することで、自動運転車が増えて、それによる学習データの蓄積が加速して、さらに精度改善につながるというテスラにとってのメリットがあります。これによってテスラの FSD の精度改善がさらに進んで、先ほども解説したように EV 派遣を確立する礎となっていきます。
And I want to switch gears here. Maybe we'll come back to FSD, but we did also get news on Cybertruck. Elon saying demand is so far off the hook, you can't even see the hook. What are your thoughts? Sam, I know you've looked at it. Tasha, curious your thoughts there as well.
Yeah, I mean, from the Google Trends, anytime Cybertruck is mentioned, you can see the search demand for it is pretty crazy. It surpasses that of the Model Y, which is very rare considering that the Model Y is in production and a car that you can actually buy, and the Cybertruck is just starting production. And then the interesting thing there is if you look at the states where that search volume is highest, it is middle of the country.
モデル Y はすでに販売中の主力商品なので、機能面ですとか価格面で検討しているユーザーも多く、それに応じて検索ボリュームも増えるのは当然です。それにもかかわらず、まだ実質的には販売していなくて、実物を街中でほとんど見ることができないサイバートラックの検索ボリュームが、このモデル Y を超えているという事実は、米国民のサイバートラックへの興味関心が高いことを裏付けていると思います。おそらくですが、販売後の検索ボリュームは販売よりも着実に増えてくるので、それに応じて SNS などでの話題性も高まって、それまで興味のなかった人にも伝播することで、さらに売り上げが増える構図が見えてきます。
And that's great because a lot of EV buyers right now are on the coast, and that's where a lot of Tesla's customers are. So these are people who, you would imagine are using trucks more, potentially for work as well. And so to see that demand there is great.
Yeah, the camo wrap on the Cybertruck, that's a chef's kiss. That is a cool looking vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's incredible. Obviously, I think Musk is hedging it and, saying it's a lot of new technology. And, we know how technology ramps go and can be slow to scale. So you do need to balance that. And I think this quarter is another good reminder of just how short-term the market is to what Tasha's saying. The questions from the investment Wall Street professionals are about production in the next quarter.
株式市場の短期視点が最近の株価の乱高下をもたらしているのは事実です。しかしこの10年でのテスラの業績を見ると EV1 台あたりの製造コストというものはなんと10分の1以下に圧縮できていて、今年3月には今後10年かけて実現するマスタープラン3を発表して、その中では EV 以外の飛行機や船舶にとどまらず、すべての産業の電動化を目指すと宣言しているのです。さらにこの時のテスラの時価総額は現在の約10倍の7兆ドルを超えていると言われています。こうしたことからマーケットはテスラのこれまでの有言実行を達成してきたという体制ですとか、直近のポジティブなニュースというものを忘れて、近視眼的に株式を不当に安く売っていることがわかるわけです。
Next 2 quarters, what's pricing going to do? Meanwhile, you have a company that's ramping over 50% growth year over year, is in the best position cost, kind of cutting prices to drive demand if they need to and still remaining profitable. So I think this is kind of a classic case of if you look short term, you can find things and say, we want more. But if you take a step back and you just appreciate this picture and the progress they're making, It's pretty remarkable. And then maybe as a last topic here, Tasha, I know you and Daniel who have been doing work on this, but the rate of data collection for Tesla and full self-driving, what did we learn in this quarter, and why is it so meaningful?
Yeah, so everyone go follow our associate Daniel McGuire on Twitter. He's doing a lot of great work. And what Sam's talking about is, we've looked at Waymo and Cruise, which are the two companies that actually have autonomous commercial vehicles on the road, to give them credit today. But they're doing it in somewhat of a geofenced strategy. Certain cities they're launching. They have at most, I believe, hundreds of cars on the road. Although Cruise does have plans to scale that to over 1 million in the fleet by the end of the decade, or by 2030. But how quickly are they actually, let's say, like collecting data? And when I say collecting data, it's the option to look at the miles that these cars are driving and pull interesting situations out of them. So you're not collecting every data point. But Waymo and Cruise and Tesla, if you compare Tesla's FSD miles driven in FSD by customers, how long did it take each of these companies to get to their most recent additional 1 million mile mark? So how quick can they drive 1 million miles? Okay, for Waymo, it's close to 2 years. For Cruise, it's like a month and a half based on their most recent announcement. For Tesla, they're actually collecting over 2 million miles of FSD data per day. And that's just FSD, by the way. They have hundreds of thousands of drivers that are opted into this right now, but they have millions of cars on the road. So that they're able to test other features in shadow mode on a very large fleet. But just FSD data alone, over 2 million miles a day compared to 1.5 months and years.
この動画の前半の解説で、テスラの汎用的な学習モデルには大量のデータが必要になると解説しましたが、この大量なデータを必要とするというデメリット部分については、走行距離というものが必要になります。FSD については、すでに参入しているウェイモですとか、クルーズとの競争をテスラのリスクファクターとして捉える人もいますが、自動運転分野での今後の競争を考える上で、重要なポイントは走行中の学習データ量になります。この学習データ量という観点では、ターシャ・キーニー氏が言ったように、先行する2社とテスラでは比べ物にならないほどの違いがあります。これは非常に残酷なデータなんですが、ここまで格差が生じている自動運転の学習競争において、テスラに勝つことなどは限りなく困難になっているという状況です。そしてこうした学習環境、学習効率の格差というものは、自動運転、ひいては EV の売り上げを通じて各社のファンダメンタルズに直結していくことになります。
I mean, I think that just shows the immense data advantage that Tesla has that we think will, continue to propel them as one of the most interesting AI plays out there.
Tasha, I want to just wrap on one last question here. Elon, and I think it was in the investor letter note, talked about this next generation vehicle platform. And so you talked about the data advantage, but what about on the manufacturing side? Because he said this would be the fastest produced vehicle in history. I know we don't have a lot of information on it yet, but curious what your thoughts are in hearing the tidbits we got this last quarter.
Yeah, so it's a question of like what is he might mean like particular model, but so it's like Toyota I think produces 8 to 9 million cars a year, but that's multiple models. But in any case, I think that what does this mean? I mean, again, it just shows Tesla's overwhelming commitment to actually making autonomy happen. We do see that, Cruise wants to have 1 million cars on the road in the next 10 years, but I mean, Tesla's planning on ramping this quickly. And if they are successful on the software side, if they do cross that full autonomy mark, just the fact that they are setting up today the capability to make that scale happen really matters. Right? Because they're not going to be the first. Waymo and Cruise were the first to launch, but they might be the first to scale.
今回、アークインベスト社のターシャ・キーニー氏はかなり控えめで保守的な表現をしていましたが、法的に誇張表現をすることができない点を踏まえると仕方なかったのかもしれません。こうした表現方法にもかかわらず、淡々と事実に基づいて提示された発言内容からは、テスラの優位性、確固たる成長の確実性というものを知ることができました。 これからの自動車メーカーの戦略としては、大量の EV を生産して市場に投下するというだけでは粗利率が低下していく一方なので、テスラはそのさらに先にある大量の EV を使って大量の走行データを獲得して FSD の精度を改善するという大いなるミッションを背負っていることがわかります。EV 販売はむしろそのかませ犬で、その真の目的は FSD による新たな収益の柱を立てることで、人類の移動すべてを握るという野望に向かって着実に進んでいるのがテスラです。テスラは今年ギガメキシコ工場の建設に着工していて、そのメキシコ工場では今月に廉価版モデルの設計図がすでにできていると公表されたように、こうした大いなる野望は実現に向かって着実に進んでいることがわかります。今回の内容は以上です。最後までご覧いただきありがとうございました。動画の内容が良ければグッドボタンを押していただけると嬉しいです。それではまた次回の動画でお会いしましょう。バイバイ。